I'll have to take notes.
Okay. Chrissy, you can hear us? Chrissy? All right. Welcome to our policy committee meeting. This is the first meeting of the new session. Today is Thursday, January 19th, 2023. Committee is myself, Karen Bierman. Herman Alvarez will be vice chair. Katie Belko also on the committee, and Chrissy Skirby joining us remotely this evening. And Mrs. Chandler and Dr. Lehman are here representing administration. Chrissy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, we do have a lot of items on the agenda today from the Strauss Esme updates, although we do not have a lot of substance to them, so I'm going to kind of hop around through them efficiently and see where we land. So the first two items are going to be abolishments. So that's 1648.11, which is the road forward COVID-19 health and safety policy, and 1648.13, the school employee vaccination requirements. So since the state disbanded the requirements there, they are now following up and abolishing the policies, so they'll be removed from the system. They'll show up on our agenda and just once for an abolishment. So if nobody has any questions.
So we only have to do this on the 25th.
Right, though, they don't come back that second month to be revisited with policy adjustments. Okay, the next item is going to be 0161, call adjournment and cancellation. This one been revised to better align with current governing statutes and administrative code. Minor revisions are not substantive, but provide additional details in the current administrative code regarding the process for calling a special meeting. So when you look at the change policy versus the existing one, they're really just cleaning up some of the language and indicating that the secretary of the board should call a special meeting whenever the president requests it, if it's requested by the superintendent because the board fails to meet according to the compliance that they're supposed to meet in, or when presented with a petition signed by a majority of the full membership of the board. So all things that were in the policy, they really just changed some of the language. If there's any questions or comments on this, and it was indicated by Strauss Esme that there's nothing substantive.
This gets brought up twice.
Yeah, all of these will get.
Anything that was recommended, right? Out of type.
Anything recommended or mandated doesn't
Or-
matter. Only abolishments are
Just-
one and done.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then any other kind of change, whatever will come up for a first read
And then,
and then a second read. Next one is 0162, notice of board meetings. This one, also a bylaw. This one, statutory definition of adequate notice is updated. And there's additional details on board conducting emergency meeting without adequate notice, and some additional details on the requirements for a rights notice. Process May has a note that the revisions are not substantive, but provide additional details regarding notice of board meetings. So it, again, when you compared the two, they took some language out, added some language in. There wasn't being really in the new one that wasn't in the old one, although it does give a little bit more understanding of adequate notice. So they pretty much gave you the details of why you might be able to meet as a board without adequate notice, and they're few and far between. It's mostly something that's feel what matters of such urgency and importance that a delay for the purpose of providing adequate notice would be likely to result in substantial harm to the public interest. Questions on that? And again, that one listed as recommended, but discussion or anything. No choices to be made.
Yeah, there's none of that either or.
Right.
Piece in there, okay.
Yeah, that's 0162. Two, 423, which is both policy and the regulation. This is bilingual and ESL education. So on this one, says, a few of the key revisions include the addition of an alternate English language proficiency assessment for students who meet the criteria for statewide alternate assessments, and then a revision to the definition of native language, and a requirement school districts administer the statewide home language survey to determine which students have a native language other than English. And the statewide screening process is a change from the district being required to develop their own screening process. So I assume this is something that we saw coming down the pike, that they're now just memorializing in policy, and that we're in compliance.
So I had Dr. Roselle review this.
Mhm.
She said these updates reflect changes that they've been making since 2000, 2001 to the ESL process. And compliant with this, we've been compliant. And actually, we did our 3-year plan last year, and that was another step in getting this squared away. So we're good to go.
Yeah, I was thinking that, because
Yep.
she did a great job presenting all that stuff last year. I can't even believe the amount of languages we have in our district. Yeah, incredible.
Hearing. Following more stress estimate alert, the 24-25 emergency virtual or remote instruction program. This is one where
What's the number on this
it
one?
might have even been left
24-25.
off the agenda.
Thank you.
So I'm bringing it up because it's part of the stress estimate alert, but similar to the previous one, we had already brought this before the board for first and second read.
And
It's
small.
been through, so even though it's in the alert this month, there's no action or board business to be done with it, but I wanted to make sure we close the gap on that it's in the alert.
Okay. Thank you.
That's an easy one.
Yep.
Check.
Next.
And there's another one in that category, which is 5512. Do that one too, so that's harassment, intimidation, and bullying. It's in Strauss Esme's alert this month. However, we've already been through first read and second read on it, so we are good to go there.
And we can- we did it last week.
Following along with the alert, I want to make sure we're covering it. All right, 5200. This one maybe we do have a couple of questions on. So 5200 is the attendance. The Strauss Esme alert is saying that it's important to be familiar with the distinction between daily student attendance recorded in the school register for state and federal reporting purposes and how student absenteeism is addressed for the purpose of district level decision making. So they're just separating out what you need to do, it sounds like to me, for state and federal requirements, but it still gives the district some flexibility on how they define excused and unexcused absences, for example, at the local level, and could have code of conduct issues or whatever that are on the local level that may or may not be part of state and federal reporting.
So to give an example,
Mhm.
Federal and state guidelines are very clear. The only excused absence is the days that are considered, religious observance as listed by the state and the, federal government. And to take your driver's test, am I correct?
Yeah.
I believe those are the only two. So we, of course, have an understanding of what's going on in life and so on and so forth, but they don't recognize them. That doesn't mean that we don't recognize them. It becomes an issue only at the high school level. K through 8 doesn't really have a mandatory policy. But it's my understanding that all of the things that we believe are considered excused as per state do not consider them excused. Is there anything you want to add, Adam, or am I just pretty clear?
I think that covers it. I
Yep.
mean, there's the religious
Yep.
observance piece, there's a Veterans Day piece.
Yep.
Participation in a board or district election, take your child to work day, college visits up to
Oh, I've
3
got the
days.
college visits, that's true.
And then a closure of busing school district that prevents students from, so if we had an issue with transportation and the Jamesburg students couldn't get here,
Right.
that would be on the state side an excuse absence.
Whereas we have a, a different understanding, people bring in a medical note and there's other issues, but when it follows the requirements to report to the state, we must follow their requirements, we can't change them. But they acknowledge, which is what they're trying to say, they acknowledge that there's a district level in order, and I like the language they use, they say, there are different rules for a school district to locally determine excuse and unexcused absence for the purposes of expectations and consequences regarding truancy. Very easy case in point. Child is hospitalized, God forbid.
Right.
They may not recognize that, but we're not gonna call that child truant. We know the child, excuse me, thank you, pardon me, is in the hospital. So that's a perfect example. That's very easy to understand.
Another one, maybe quarantine
Oh.
days, right? Like, how are we reporting those to, this, we don't?
We're not
we-
anymore.
we-
No, we don't,
policy.
no,
We're not
So like,
doing
the 5 days they're out, but it's not being held against them.
right. And it never was.
Okay.
So in terms of excused absences at locally, so
Right.
we've added some things to the current policy, so not necessarily for the policy that we're looking at. You can add them to the one that, because there's some fill in the blanks in the
Right.
form. So
Yeah.
like an illness with a written letter from the parent, right? That's not a state excused absence, but locally, right?
It
we
is.
recognize. We have attendance in court
Mm-hmm.
in our current policy.
And the verbiage on our policy with the excused absence, for the medical thing, the parent note or notification was sufficient, it's not a doctor's note.
Correct. It's actually, and it gives you some options within the proposed piece, but it's specifically written, the student's illness supported by a written letter from the parent upon a student's return or supported by notification to the school by the student's parent. Doesn't require the doctor's note.
That was changed after that one, we changed it. That was before me. I do remember that.
Then it's another one we currently use as a local exception is, like I said, attendance in court where appropriate when consistent with an individualized education program, the Individuals with Disabilities Act accommodation plans under 29 USC, so state, federal code, and then individualized healthcare plans. So if there's a reason outlined as an IEP.
Half day, 3 days a week, bringing a child back to school after a child's been out for any reason. They would not be then penalized for the days that so it's a 5-day week, and we say that we're gonna bring them back 3 days a week as per the individualized health plan. So that's another example.
Student suspension from school, family illness or death supported by a written letter from the parent upon the student's return. Same verbiage for the illness, actually.
So
Yep.
all of these that are listed in the regulation are
Yep,
part of our regulation.
Ours.
It's
Yep.
not,
Not
we've
state.
already adopted all of them.
Yep.
yep.
Just saying.
All of them except for, we don't have an absence considered excused by the Commissioner of Education or the Department of Ed. We just don't have that written, actually, an absence considered excused by the New Jersey Department of Education, but not, they added Commissioner in the new one, so. We should adopt that as well.
And we didn't have any creative ones that we have listed that they don't have listed.
No, driver's license, take child to work
Yeah.
day. And then we do have that last piece, an absence for a reason not listed above, but deemed excused by the principal on a written request.
We're closing for half of the religious holidays anyway. Doing the best we can,
And still keeping us.
still keeping 180 days on the calendar.
Plus
I
two
think that-
smoking.
I think that's awesome.
Okay, any questions on this one?
No, I think
And there's nothing,
it's wordy, but it's
Word.
Very wordy.
wordy, but it's like.
but there's no changes, so to speak, for us, because anything that they're bringing forward, it's something that we're already
Correct,
doing.
right.
Hmm. 8140, student enrollment. There are a couple here where, apparently the current policy may refer to students as pupils and pupil is out, student is in.
I didn't mean to laugh, but
sure the
you
offense
serious?
is on that, but yeah.
Are you serious?
There's a bunch of that this month where they changed references from pupil to student. Yeah. Strauss asked me going. So let me get to the resume on this one. 8140. On this one is a mandated policy. It's revised to include the newly created definition days in membership that was added to, and then get the statute replacing the definition for average daily attendance. So that's another verbiage thing. So wherever they used to use average daily attendance, they're now using days in membership. The requirement to keep separate registers depending on the student's grade or classification has been removed. And the equation for calculating average daily attendance has been removed from one different statute and regulation guide and added, revised to reflect the change here. The data collection process for the application for state school aid has been revised to assign data collection responsibilities to the superintendent or designee and the school business administrator, board secretary, or designee. Minor edits to both policy and regulation guides. Again, reading through
This
it.
is the records that we have to send by October, for the October 16th, so that we have that.
And we've always, what needs to be done.
We always seem to have the numbers, you know, we have them anyway. Wouldn't be a hard thing to just send what we have on
Nope.
October 16th. I think we do a good job of keeping the records.
So is there any feedback on this or any good?
We've always followed suit of what's required, and we've never had any issues of any kinds, and we always meet all deadline. So that goes with it.
All right, so 8330, student records, again, formerly known as people records. That one, it is a mandated policy. Minor revisions, most of the changes being citation and language updates, which is the student pupil thing. Majority of these revisions located in the regulation as opposed to the policy. And everything's been revised to align with the appropriate administrative code section. So when you look at what they changed, it was nonsense.
Yeah, it just literally took like,
I mean, they used to use
it
the
took out the
word
word school.
non-adult
just put
as two
district.
words. It's
Yeah,
now
that's
one
that one.
word, non-adult, things like that.
And they took out they made the pronouns gender.
Yes, there's always a lot of that, but usually it's if they bring something forward, it'll have some other
They took out the
reason
word
to
school
bring it, and then
before
they'll clean all
district.
that up at the
Yeah,
same time.
so it does no longer say school district, it just says district.
But again, as a district, I'm sure, so far as student records are concerned, we're
We are meeting
adhering
all of
to
the
the
needs.
policy and
Yeah.
the regulation.
Yep.
Anything we have to debate? That'll present the first read. All right,
And there were changes to the regulations on that too, I saw, right? Because I just looked at. Yeah, okay. Just updates, just.
all right, and to the security ones next. So now, my interpretation of security ones, so Strauss Esmond brought forward 8420.2, which is bomb threats, .7, which is lockdown procedures, and .10, which is active shooter. They're identifying those three policies, regulations, excuse me, as regulations that shouldn't have a lot of the meaningful information in it of how you respond as a district, that they want you to just reference in those regulations, that you have a plan that exists elsewhere that's a little bit more under the hood for security reasons.
It's, yeah, I think it's, yeah, if I may, appropriate, as you're saying, they have now crossed out and removed so much of the verbiage, which I think is good.
Yeah, no, it's
Because,
excellent.
you know, it's something that, you know, we have a plan, we do what needs to be done, and we train the appropriate people internally, and we don't need to share the plan with everybody else.
Right, because I remember bringing up that when
Yes.
everybody wanted to know about
Plans,
the
you did
the
it.
plans, the internal plans for the schools. No,
Yeah.
you don't get to see that.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but,
The wrong person is looking at that.
right,
So we're gonna give you a picture of one classroom and that's it. Yeah, one classroom.
I don't even need a picture of the classroom. I don't wanna know where the doors are. I don't think the public should know where the doors and the windows are.
And that was the same for all three of your class.
Right.
Yeah.
Any
So I think
questions
that's,
or anything?
that's
on
a
the
good
other-
one. We have three good ones.
That is a good one.
Very good.
Should have happened sooner.
I agree. Good.
Okay, so
That
number
was very
two that we have, I got the two more, one would be product of discussion. I brought forward 0164, so that's not part of the Strauss estimate update, that's conduct of a board meeting, which is one of our bylaws. That one, we need to just address, since we voted at the reorg meeting, that we were going to change the
Order.
line of how we do the meeting and insert the closed session. So in between New Jersey Open Public Meeting Statement and the approval of the minutes, we'll now put this, the closed session resolution until public meeting start time. And then we'll also change the second closed session to just note if needed.
As necessary, okay.
Mhm.
I have no problem with that, that's fine.
Yes, that'll reflect what the board
Mhm.
voted on. So just to memorialize it in the policy, even though, the president, I guess, could change in any given meeting, the order that they want, then since we have.
So since, all
Sub-5.
right, so since you brought that up,
Mhm.
why don't we remove that whole list? And,
I don't know, I mean, I assume it's there for a reason.
because it's,
Because we
confusing,
don't
why don't we
change
make it a
it every-
regulation?
Well,
What
it's
do we-
bylaws, not.
Bylaw.
It's a bylaw, because it's how the board conducts itself.
Right, okay.
So I just felt like it was probably
Yeah.
worth keeping it up to what we're currently doing, but it still doesn't change the privilege that the board president has to
Right,
shuffle around
To
and type it
shuffle
up.
the agenda, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then I don't have a problem with it, it's fine.
So closed session as needed is really the change.
Closed session
Closed session has to be
inserted for
added
the
to
first
the-
one,
To the top of the
and that,
agenda.
with a note that it's just until the public meeting start time. You put a time limit on it. And then that second closed session resolution, the
That's
one that should have the if needed.
What's from, is it 7:15, closed session until 7:15?
6:30 was the
6:30
start of
to
the meeting, and then it would go right into closed session till 7:15.
So that's,
We'd come back at 7:15.
right, so it's closed session until 7:15.
Right.
And then the second one is closed session items only,
If needed.
if needed.
Right.
Okay. Zelensky has a question.
Yeah, that one.
And then
Yes.
just a comment on that, because I know the last item then on the agenda is public forum for closed session items. So I guess maybe put as needed there too, because if we don't have that second closed session, then I'm not going to call for a public forum.
And your first public forum, when we say it's agenda items only plus closed session?
Well,
So
that's an
we-
agenda.
So
That's
it's a
good.
closed session
If it all happens, yeah. I mean,
at that point.
right.
so Fine, all right,
That makes sense, right, because it's an agenda item, even though it's closed session, it's still an agenda item.
right. So we're covered.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Agreed. All right, so the last Strauss estimate policy, which is the first one, is 0152 board officers. So on this one, the existing policy, which is, bylaw, is, there's two things that, just because there's been enough litigation on it now, the state's throwing their hands up and putting it to the local level and letting the boards decide on options for how they want to elect officers. So our existing bylaw has been that we have to have a quorum to have a meeting, of course, and that the vote is a majority of those present based on the quorum. The state is now giving local level an option to define it as keeping it that way or changing it to be a majority of the entire board. The other option they're giving is whether we do the roll call vote, which is the way our bylaw currently reads and how we've been doing it, or we have the option to adopt the system of the paper ballot, which would turn the process to be the same as always with the nominations. So 1, 2, 3, 10 people get nominated. All the nominations are made, to close the nominations, each person would have to write who they're voting for and who they are, right? It would go to the board secretary, it would be read, so it would say Karen Bierman is casting a vote for Karen Bierman, et cetera, and so all 10 would be read. If there's a majority of votes there that fit with whatever option we choose and chosen for the majority, that candidate, that nominated person would then be elected. And the process would just keep continuing that way until a majority was hit, the majority was hit. That's opposed to the way we're doing it currently, which is we take each of the nominations and then we go around the whole table with yes or no on each one, and then same way calling it out until we get the majority vote. So pros and cons on both sides. I still feel relatively neutral because it was something that I felt could go either way with any given board member. I did poll all the board members in advance of the meeting, and it was definitely heavily leaned towards shifting to the paper. I think we're 8-2 on that. And on the majority one, it was closer, but still leaning toward majority of those present as opposed to majority of the whole board. That one was more like 7-3, something like that. So now that one is something to discuss and get some opinions on and see as a committee what we want to recommend to.
I like the ballot, because it gives an opportunity to make your vote without looking to the left or the right of you to see what your friend is doing,
Mhm.
right? Because let's face it, that's what happens. And I like the option of the voting for the board members present. If you can't show up to the reorganization meeting and you're a board member, then you really need to rethink your board service.
But you have to have a quorum, right?
Well, you always have to have a
the
quorum.
meeting.
No matter.
You always have to have a
So it would
quorum,
be a-
so
but
we would have a quorum in order to even get to this
No,
point.
so that's what it currently is. It's majority, so the choice they're giving us is majority of the whole board, which would mean if 10 people are on the board and 6 show up, now that person was gonna need a unanimous vote of those 6 in
Okay.
order to get elected.
Okay.
Does that happen? Will it happen? Could it happen? I don't know.
What
Our,
do you think's
our
possible?
experience has been, you're mostly sitting with the full table on the
Mhm.
reorg meeting. And I don't even know what happens, like if something happened where a new member couldn't sit because they didn't get through the fingerprinting thing or something like that happened. I don't even know that the old member is, they're gone yet. Like, I don't know how
I
it
don't know.
works. I
I
don't even
think
know what
they're
the fine print on that one would be.
No, I haven't seen
I'm
the
not
fine
sure
print on
either.
it.
So that would be
Right,
the
let's
only
see
thing I
attorney.
could anticipate that might be
If
a
there's the
problem, right? If you didn't get through the security thing.
That might be a
yes, of
question
the
for
org
Vito.
meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
I like the paper ballot also, for the reasons that, Ms. Balko stated. It takes away that pressure, oh, she said this, or, oh, she, it's like kind of a little bit more private.
But remember, it's private for that
private
moment,
before-
Yeah, but then
right,
it's read
it's-
out loud.
right, there's
But at that
nothing,
moment.
right, they are
Yeah.
not giving us the opportunity to have a secret ballot.
No,
or something like that, just
Right.
make sure that, you're signing.
Yeah, the
you know,
public will
and who
still
you're
know
voting
who
for
you
and
voted
candidates.
for.
Right.
Yes,
But
Exactly.
just in a different way.
Karen, I just have a question about the way you described it. So
Uh-huh.
right now, we have nominations. So you have 2 or 3 people nominated, to close the nominations. Then you do a voice call vote for each nomination.
in order, right.
Would we be doing a ballot vote then for each nomination? Because it sounded like you said, well, then you would get a ballot and you would write down who you would want to vote for, which is different than the way we do it now. Because technically, in a voice vote with multiple people nominated, you can vote yes to multiple people. We've seen that done before. Because basically what you're saying as a board member is, I would support this person as president, I would support that person as president. You don't have to vote yes and no to nominations. You can, they're separate votes. So as long as we're having multiple ballots and it's being conducted the same way, I'm fine with doing a paper ballot, but I don't want to see it go from now you have to pick amongst those that are nominated who you want to vote for.
That's what written paper ballot is. You're picking from all of the nominees. You're not doing each nominee individually when it goes.
See,
to
that's a much different way than we vote now. I personally don't. I mean, my personal preference is not to do it that way because it's changing the way we actually vote, and it's limiting a board member's ability to say that, because I've seen it done many times where multiple people were nominated and board members have voted yes to both nominees. I just think that's limiting a board.
Let me read what written paper ballot means so that we're all, clear on that, and that everyone who may not have printed all this out and has to think about it before the main meeting can also be privy to. Voting shall take place by written ballot after nominations are closed for each position, president and vice president. Each board member will be provided a paper ballot after nominations are closed for each position. Each board member shall write the name of one board member they wish to vote for on the paper ballot. Each board member must print and sign their name on their paper ballot. The ballot shall be read aloud by the board secretary, identifying the board member and their vote.
Okay, so it's one person.
So I have a question. We have to use this language, or can we incorporate it the way Ms. Skirby's saying, but do like one paper ballot?
For each
For
candidate
like-
that's called.
Right.
Do what you do now,
Do
with the
each-
exception of putting it in
right,
writing.
But instead of saying it out loud, just write it down and go in order of nomination.
I would say we would have to seek attorney advice on
Okay.
that to make sure it was
Because I
the
agree,
scope,
they've
right? So the
limited-
state's coming down and saying, these are your options. So
Yeah.
now if you're gonna elaborate creatively on the options, you probably have to get.
I
opinion
can, I
on
can
that.
speak to the attorney. I mean, I would probably think
remember
that it's
seeing on
probably,
NJSBA that you could do it paper ballot by,
just like we do now, except
except,
you write it
right,
down.
right.
Yeah,
That option already
And that's what-
existed, basically. It just.
Karen, that's
wasn't
what I
written.
presented to you when I wrote that piece, was that it would be, each person would write down the nominee. If, if there was three of them, they'd write down the nominees, and you vote yes or no for each one.
You could do it like that. too.
That was my suggestion before I saw this was already being suggested by the state.
So we do have time for purposes of
We have a year.
speak to. could speak to
Yeah,
the
there's
attorney,
no
get
rush
some-
on this. We could
get some-
debate this for the
Yeah, we
next
just
9 months.
had our
Yeah.
reorg, so we have.
And and the existing policy will always stand
Mhm.
until then, because there's no mandated changes or anything. They're just saying,
All that's-
Stress SMA was coming forward saying there's been some litigation, and because of that, they've looked at the
Mhm.
policy the way it exists, and they do think there's some vagueness there, and they'd like you to button it down, but it's recommended, it's not mandated.
Mhm.
Because the only thing that would be concerning would be how many times can you go back then to paper ballot? Like, I think it has to be written down, because if, say you have 4 nominees and now you have 10 members who choose between 4 people, so here you're not going to get to that majority of the board, or the
Remember,
majority of
Now
the
you'll have to
president.
take another ballot.
That would be the same process, like if we had that even with the verbal roll call, if you're not getting a majority, then what's gonna happen? Usually a candidate will drop out, and
Right, but right now you have the opportunity to vote for multiple candidates. This wouldn't be. This would be pick one of the 4. You know what I'm saying? Like we do
Yeah, I
separate
hear-
votes for each. Now that would be my only concern with a paper ballot and then picking one person to put down, because I feel like we're going to be creating a lot more confusion at our organization meeting
Right.
I mean, again, because then you have to have, I would assume that we would, the board secretary to be the person who counts the ballots. Because we have to, I think we have to specify that, who would be actually creating the ballot, counting the ballot, and then reading them aloud.
Says that,
It's
actually,
all
option one actually,
Assigned to the board.
it actually
secretary,
says it in option one.
Which, and even at
Okay.
the time, there's the chair. of the
I mean,
meeting.
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, if we could ask maybe our board council if we could do it the way we do now with, you know, with a ballot for each office. I just,
Basically do it the same way we do it now, except you have the opportunity, instead of being called on verbally aloud, you write it down, you write your name, you sign it, but you do exactly what is being done now, but it's done in writing. I will ask that question and find out if that is doable.
I think it is doable, actually.
And you can do it all on
Already.
one page.
Mhm.
Yeah.
well,
just put-
I don't know if this is a change with the Department of Education and this is the new, if this is something they change in the statute giving the option, I mean, we would definitely have to check on that
Change the
because we can't
statute or
just.
There's no statute for.
It's a bylaw.
No, it's a bylaw and it's not mandatory, so I think we might have some maneuverability. I don't know. Find out. I will ask.
Right. And then how about on majority definition, whether
I
it's
think it should be majority present,
present or whole?
present.
That's what it is now.
As long
so
as there's a
yeah.
quorum, right? So.
Yeah.
Well, you
Can't even
can't
have
open
a
the
meeting
meeting
without
I'm
the
just
quorum.
worried that some
You can't
people
open the
wouldn't
meeting-
show up on purpose.
You
know
can't
what I
open the
mean?
meeting without a
Like,
quorum.
that's what I was thinking about.
No, you have to have a quorum.
You have to, you can't open the meeting without a quorum, so.
All right, yeah, I'm okay with that. Majority
So
of those
that's keeping
present.
it the
Yeah.
same.
Well, it's a valuable meeting, how could you not be?
Okay, so we'll leave it at that, we'll get a
And
little
I
bit more
would legal
information
opinion
on
on the other
what
one, and I understand
scope
exactly,
is.
we don't want to change what we do, we just want to put it in writing. And like you said,
Yeah, we
read
don't
on a piece
want
of
to have to
paper.
read it out loud, we want to write it down.
Right. And then
Do
it's
it,
read
do it,
aloud
do
by
it.
them, correct?
Yeah.
Any questions or anything else? Policy? If not,
No, I don't think so.
that concludes our policy meeting. Thank you.
Excellent.
Excellent.